now some of my favorite people. Hello, Scott Morey. How are
Jerry,
you?
how are you? I'm good.
Fantastic. Good. Scott from 111 and Wayne Pryor from 2Five1. Hello.
Jerry, how are you?
Very well. Thank you very much.
You.
Good to see both of you guys. You know, they didn't actually tell me what we would be discussing, but I figured I would just kind of lob the ball to you, let you guys play with it. I guess my first question to both of you is, what do you see shaping up as the theme of this year?
So I will start, and I'm gonna pass it over to Wayne. If you go back to last year, and you asked me a similar question, and I was talking about the number of startups that were in this room.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation about over the next year, like some of them are going to go away.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we're hitting a turn in regards to that, and in regards to what's happening in that space, and around people falling out, and around consolidation, and a bunch of interesting things, you know, around PropTech. And funny enough, Wayne and I, over the last couple months, jointly with Realcomm, did a fair amount of research on the topic. Actually, we shared some of that this morning. But why don't you talk about the broader PropTech market?
Yeah, well, you know, what's interesting about it is well, when we started to do our research, what we found was you looked at sort of capital flows by segment, and what we saw was most of the money was going into coworking and residential platforms. When you started to look at CRE, true CRE, the funding was actually very low. As an example, we looked at some of the studies from CRE Tech from last year, $8.6 billion of sort of known transactions. $3.8 billion of that went to co-working, 4.4 went to residential, 400 million to commercial real estate. So when you start looking at that, really underfunded. And so then Scott and I also took a look and said, well, some of these companies are getting funding somewhere. Where's it happening? And what was interesting was what we found out around M&A activity.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the M&A activity is not private equity hedge fund money.
Yeah.
It's Yardi, Altus, MRI, RealPage. I mean, RealPage alone in the last 18 months has put out almost $1 billion in acquisitions, and no one's talking about it.
Yeah.
Now, they're public, so they report the numbers.
Right.
The other guys aren't public, but I mean, it's got to be, I'm speculating, $3 or $4 billion that's out there that no one's written about. And so you look about the means to affect change, which is hard. But the best way to do is if you have a relationship already, which I'm working on with you over the years, maybe. I haven't changed it yet, Jerry, but we're going to work on that later. But if I have a relationship with you, I have a means to introduce something new, right?
Yeah.
So, but if you got someone coming off the street coming in, you're like, it's much harder. And so we think those organizations are actually more effectively driving change and adoption than those that aren't within that umbrella. If I'm private equity and well-funded, I still got to find a way in. I got to establish rapport, and that takes time.
Right.
And I think that was the most interesting insight. So,
One of the other things we were talking about this morning as well was just sort of where valuations are. You know, there's sort of the way that we're calculating valuations on these PropTech firms.
Yeah.
And then given the excitement and sort of the news around all this, we kind of consider it to be a value premium. So maybe slightly overvalued.
Yeah.
The real question is going to be, does that value premium actually play itself out? Or is there some bit of a downturn or a discount that happens? It remains to be seen.
I see.
Yeah.
Kind of reminiscent of the first bubble in 2000.
Correct.
We knew there was something there. No one quite knew how to make it pay off, and
it was way smaller. So you go back, we were tracking 300 companies in 2000 that were in the space.
Yeah.
3,000 today, multiple of 10. So you look at the sheer volume, it's just insane. But you go back to those years, as you bring it up, and the fallout there was pretty substantial. We could go through a whole laundry list of companies that just don't exist anymore. A lot of them threw some great parties in those years at Realcomm. So we're thankful of that.
I still have a hangover.
But, you know, the value was gone, right? I mean, it was absolutely just brutal. You come to today with 3,000, you had roughly 500 companies last year raise capital, roughly 10 billion. You take the top 20 companies of those transactions, so 3,000 companies, startups, 500 got capital. The top 20 took 75% of the capital, 7.5 billion. So one is you got 2,500 companies that have no money, or they're self-funded running around, desperate for adoption, going back to it's hard to establish a relationship and affect change. And then the ones that got funded, you got these, you know, top guys that took all the cash.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's a hard life.
It is
quite
tricky.
hard.
And a lot of that, I would imagine, in that top little cream layer are people we all know, and the innovation may not even be that severe, but it's just the name is trusted. And so what do you do? Where does that leave us?
I don't know. Where does that leave us?
Well, yeah. If I knew, I'd actually be placing bets. But
yeah.
what I think it leads us is that we're seeing capital concentration in a few companies that are well known and actually still considered startups, when in some cases 6, 7, 8 years old.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that. What I'm concerned about is what happens to some of the smaller companies that would be viable $5 to $10 million revenue businesses that potentially could be drowned in VC money, trying to get them to $100 million, $200 million, $300 million business, and breaking them apart, and we lose that great idea, a great solution that would be valuable to our industry. So I don't have any answers, but it's one of the things I'm going to keep tracking over the course of the next couple of years.
Well, it feels like there should be a fund for just those little diamond in the rough companies that have all the innovation, none of the funding, but all of the right stuff. Is anyone doing that?
Well, you've got the accelerators, and there's a number of them out there. And time is going to tell, I guess, at the end of the day for those. I mean, again, it's not an easy thing. You would argue if you're raising capital on either side, you're trying to get rapid growth, you're trying to get an exit.
Yeah.
So the expectations are misaligned from the front.
Right.
So you're almost better self-funding, which a lot of people can't do.
Yeah.
And I was meeting with the CEO of Entrada, actually, Dave Bateman, a week and a half ago. He's 13 years in. I did a podcast with him, by the way. I'm not plugging that, but he said something really interesting. He goes, it takes 10 years. He's self-funded. He goes, it takes 10 years to turn the corner.
Really?
Yeah. And he's 13 years in. His growth has really been the last 5 years. And so he's like, you've got to be passionate about what you're doing, because if it's about the economics, you're never going to last. It's really interesting. It's true, though, right?
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah.
And so how are you at 2Five1, 111, how are you guys leveraging this?
Well, I think, in a couple of ways. What we're doing is helping our clients by trying to wade through this and really take a focus not so much on the 3,000 companies. Let's step back. What's the problem you're trying to solve? Let's clearly define that first. That gets us to what sector are we talking about? And then from what sector, then we can actually start having conversations with the startups in that sector. Yeah. We've clearly defined our problem statement first. What I see a lot of happening is it's like, wow, that looks interesting. Well, it's
shiny
like
object.
It's sort of like the movie Squirrel, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of that going on from the customer side looking at these companies. I think if we take a much more disciplined approach about how we engage with these startups, I think that's really the right way to go.
Same? Would you say?
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a lot of, I use the word shiny objects. And I spend a lot of time trying to save people from themselves.
Yeah.
It's true, though, really, right? And going back to Wayne's comment is around, there's a lot of criteria to decide if it makes sense or not. So, of course, there's got to be a business problem to solve. But also, it's got to be about what the switching costs are, how competitive the market. So you take the tenant engagement space, which is pretty crowded, although getting less crowded. If you have 30 players, you're placing bets. Either any bet you place has got some level of risk with it, right? And the last thing you want to do is place a bet on someone that 3 years out is not going to be around.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of factors, I think, to make a smart decision. And you could quite easily spend a bunch of capital that just went out the door.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So tell us how to make $1 million.
Well, Jerry, I don't know if I can answer that one either. I mean, you look at valuations on software companies are a multiple of 5. I'm on the services side as Wayne. It's a tough life, by the way, though we enjoy the variety and happy to have the clients that we have in the scheme of things. There are opportunities more so in this space than ever to use technology to generate revenue. Although tricky, right? And there are opportunities to create real value on an efficiency basis in other areas. And there's no one generic answer. I always say generalizations, there's always a truth and an untruth, so I'm not going to go there. But certainly by certain categories and subcategories, there are definitely opportunities where money can be made.
Yeah. Same?
Yeah, I think that, and I'd also kind of point to data analytics. I think there's a real opportunity in terms of data analytics at scale. What we're seeing is largely data analytics within the 4 walls of an organization. To the extent that we can expand that and start looking at much larger data sets, I think there's some opportunities there. You look at some of the stuff that Yardi's trying to do with their Matrix program.
Right.
So there are opportunities that I think we're just starting to tap. And if you think about what's possible with IoT devices and collecting and aggregating all that data, I think if there's a $1 million business in there, that might be it.
Very good.
I'll tell you what's interesting with that, though. If you look at, you ever heard of YieldStar before?
Yeah.
So this goes back, oh gosh, probably the last cycle in 2000, actually. I think they formed outside, before that. RealPage, I think, bought them in like 2002. But that is for multifamily pricing.
Yeah.
It's almost like airline pricing and supply and demand, which is fluid. I mean, think about the different parameters on any form of space. It's complicated, right, in the scheme of things. And YieldStar, they weren't the only one, but they've been pretty dominant in that space, started to put the science between what many viewed as an art.
Right.
Which is, how do I price that to maximize value at that point in time?
Right.
It's funny because that's a true Moneyball story.
Right.
We haven't had many since. I mean, I agree with you. I think they're coming.
Harvest the big data and look for the valuation on those little gem companies that might be being overlooked. Guys, thank you as always.
Pleasure.
I look forward to having this discussion in 2020.
Sounds good.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Jerry.
Thank you both.